You will make it through. The fitra is awake in you. With Quran and Sunnah by your side, here's a place where it will thrive. You will make it through. You will make it through. The fitra is awake in you. With Quran and Sunnah on his side, here's a place where it will thrive. You will make it through. With Quran and Sunnah on his side, here's a place where it will thrive. You will make it through.
Topic, which are the consequences. We're going to speak about the consequences. What happens. Okay, let me put this here so I can see Rumble. Okay, let me move that out the way so I can see. I keep forgetting I got Rumble sitting here too. All right. Okay. This is in this chapter of the book, Dr. Karim Abuzaid highlights that the principles of allegiance and disassociation have been neglected, which they have, and misunderstood. And I'm gonna tell you, especially during the Ottoman, from the time of the Ottomans to now, that's been neglected and misunderstood in two main ways. Number one, unawareness, and number two, an intentional ignorance. And this dilution has undermined the foundation of faith and left the Muslim community vulnerable, as we are today, to external. Oops, I hit that button again. This is what happens when I got all these computers. Hold on. It's left us vulnerable to external threats. And so what this chapter does, Dr. Karim Abuzaid examines how the media and liberalism, how they both have put emphasis on absolute equality. And because of this absolute equality, which we can't have absolute, because we're living in non-Muslim country, you know, because of absolute equality and human brotherhood and coexistence and tolerance, these things have contributed to the erosion of the principles of allegiance and disassociation. You know, again, as Muslims, you know, we get along on the job. We get along, you know, at work, at school. But then after when we go punch out and go home, we distance ourselves. Also, Muslim lawmakers have also contributed to the dilution of allegiance and disassociation here with us. Also, this chapter is going to examine different manifestations of neglect in understanding and applying allegiance and disassociation, including doubt and questioning the capability of allegiance and disassociation with moderacy and mercy. We talked about that a little bit. You have the extreme right and the extreme left groups. Also, this chapter is going to address these issues, emphasizing understanding and applying the principles of allegiance and disassociation appropriately so that we can uphold the integrity of our belief system and promote the true brotherhood and harmony that we're supposed to have as Muslims. And also this chapter is going to speak about different topics related to allegiance and disassociation, including the dangers of blind obedience to oppressive regimes. We're going to talk about balancing our allegiance with respect for others and the prohibition of imitating non-Muslims, which is a big problem today. We're going to also examine the threat of forming too close of associations with non-Muslims, which is what we see happening here in the West. And also this chapter is going to help to develop a better understanding of the principles of allegiance and disassociation and their significance and the risk that are associated with neglecting the true concepts of allegiance. So let's get started. Okay. And like I said, you know, most masjids, most governments in the Muslim lands, they don't want to talk about this concept. If you say that you want to come and do a lecture on al Wala Wal Bara, they'll turn you down. They don't want to hear about it. They don't want it discussed. You know, but we have to understand that the principles of allegiance and disassociation are components of the Shahada. They are components of our belief system. They're part of the Quran and they're part of the Sunnah. And unless we properly implement them in our lives, we will not have true brotherhood. We will not have true harmony, and we will never have social justice within our Muslim communities. And that's why our communities are as they are today. Okay? Unless we uphold al Wala Wal Bara, there'll never be fairness. Okay? And that's why you go to the masajids. You go and ask for help to pay your bills because you're African American, they turn you away. But as you're walking out the door, an Arab behind you is getting approved assistance. Why? Because the concept of allegiance doesn't exist within our communities. We're back to tribalism. We're back to favoritism. We're back to racism and all of that. And that's what happens when we neglect to apply these principles in our communities. Okay? And then we have a problem, whereas when you do see brothers and sisters practicing the moderate approach of distancing themselves from that which can stand in the way of true Islam. For example, you'll go to a mosque and there's some brothers who will say, well, I don't believe in the intermingling. The intermingling is against Islam. You know, what happened to the women praying, you know, with a curtain, for example? You got the women and men praying in the same room, you know, right together. At least put the young boys behind the men. You know, the prophet didn't have a barrier. Yes, he did. The young boys was the wall. They were the barrier between the men and women. But now you got the women and men praying right behind each other with no barrier. And the women have on all the perfume. The women have on the tight-fitting clothes. They're standing head to butt with the men. I mean, come on. No barrier. I'm not into this intermingling. I come into the musalla to pray and I smell the perfume from the sisters. The sisters are hanging around in the hallway, you know, with these dresses on, with all the perfume on and makeup on, belts on, trying to solicit and get all the attention. They all up in the brothers' faces, you know, smiling and grinning. Where's the modesty? The prophet didn't have this. They look at you as being a fanatic. They look at you as being an extremist because you want to uphold al Bara. You want to uphold the distancing. You go to the Eid prayer. You know, you see the women and men sitting together at the tables together, you know, and then you say, can't we separate? At least put the women on one side of the room and the men on the other side. The Imam says, well, the prophet didn't separate them, but that was different. Those were the original companions. They were God-fearing. You know, the women weren't sitting there trying to flirt with the men. The women and men weren't playing footsie underneath the table. The women and men were married too. The prophet was sitting at the table. They were related too. You got to remember, they were relatives. They were sitting at the table with their cousins and family members and husbands and wives. You got single women sitting at the table trying to pick up a man. And they sitting there with their feet touching and close together, eyeing each other. The women with them tight clothes on and perfume. This ain't right, man. Can't we separate them? And you know the sisters trying to pick up a dude, and the men ain't lowering their gazes. They look at you as an extremist, as a fanatic. Oh, here he is, the haram police. So, accusing those who do practice the moderate application of Wal Bara, you know, of promoting hateful and violent ideologies, this undermines the efforts to uphold the teachings of Islam in a just and fair manner. You label them as extremists. This is not only baseless, but it's also harmful. You isolate them from the circle of believers and the circle of scholars and those who teach the religion of Islam to the public. And you end up putting a culture of fear and suspicion amongst the Muslims, when all these brothers and sisters are doing is trying to implement Wal Bara to keep the fitna away, to keep the dignity that the original companions had, and what the prophet came with the lie. Because come on, we know what's going on. We know it's all about picking people up. We know that everybody looking, you know, to get laid and paid. You know that Eids have become a party scene, a way of women and men trying to hook up. Come on, we know what's going on in the mosques now. Instead of the mosques being a place of worship, they become a place of hookup. Instead of doing this, we should recognize that these brothers and sisters are trying to uphold the true Islamic principles. And if we would if we would uphold those principles, this would foster a better understanding, which in turn could promote true brotherhood and harmony within the Muslim community. And it could prevent the spread of harmful ideologies that could prevent us from taking on the ways of the unbelievers, like so many of us have done. We've become just like the Christian churches, the deacons sleeping with the women, you know, the sexcapades in the mosques going on like the sexcapades in the churches. It's bad enough that we got women on the board, like the churches got the women deacons and all of that stuff going on too. If we would implement Wal Bara and live by the guidance of Islam, then we wouldn't have the problems of the non-Muslims. Like the prophet said, whenever you imitate a people, not only do you become like them, but you also inherit their problems. You inherit their issues. And we have the same issues and problems that these non-Muslims have in their churches and their communities. The sex out of wedlock, the high divorce rate, high apostasy rate amongst our kids, and all of that. Okay. Also, when we fail to uphold the principles of allegiance and disassociation, it also leads to negligence in defending the rights of the oppressed. Remember, Allah commands us as Muslims to stand out for justice as witnesses to Allah, even if it's against ourselves or our parents or our relatives, and whether it be against the rich or the poor, because Allah can best protect both. Islam holds justice as one of its most fundamental objectives. The Quran and the Hadith emphasize the importance of standing up for the oppressed and their rights, regardless of religion or nationality. Neglecting this obligation is a form of disloyalty and disassociation in Islam. Remember, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever amongst you sees an evil, he should try to change it with his hand. And if he can't with his hand, then at least speak out against it. And if he can't do that, then at least hate it in his heart by making dua against it. So that hadith there highlights the responsibility of Muslims to act against oppression and injustice. When we don't implement allegiance and disassociation, we're failing to defend the rights of those who are unable to defend the rights of themselves. So again, a lot of the problems that we're faced with today as a nation, y'all can see why they're here. Is because we as Muslims no longer adhere to allegiance and disassociation. And Allah tells us in the Quran, when we fail to do that, that's when we can expect calamities to befall us. And those calamities come from Him. Remember, Allah says whatever bad befalls us comes from our own doing. And it comes from Him as a result of what we brought upon ourselves.